All right, welcome back to Jesse on Fire's channel. I have got a doozy of a video for you guys today, and it's going to start with me complimenting you guys as a group before I get into my first topic, which is going to be Jon Jones' most recent comments on his career and how it's about to blow up, okay? But let me just lay out what I'm doing here. Number one, I am doing long form stuff now, at least for the time being. I might change my mind tomorrow, but I'm going to stop breaking them up into these tiny little segments because you know what? Everything I say is fire. You're going to want to hear all of it. So let's just stop pretending that, you know, you need to read the titles before you watch. If I'm talking about it, it's probably interesting enough to watch. So I'm just going to do the long form ones, and that's it. I'll tell you in advance what I'm going to do them on, though, because I want to talk about Jon Jones, his recent comments on his career, boxing versus MMA, like the future of both sports, Cejudo's managers' comments on his retirement, and I'm going to do a little, you know, I'm going to give Dana White a hand job, all right? I love Dana White. The guy's a fucking savage, but I have some specific things that I want to compliment him on. But first of all, here's what I want to start off with. Before I do that, actually, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell. I mean, this should go without saying, but you know what I would actually really appreciate is if you enjoy the content. I would love, I mean, like genuinely love, like, I'm turning it up on the mic. Like, it's not like I talk to my wife like this, you know, well, actually I do, but, but I'm being genuine when I tell you I would very much appreciate if you guys would take my content and go and post it in these MMA, you know, forums. Like if you guys are in the forums, show people my content because listen, I know I'm, you know, being a self-aggrandizing prick, but let's be honest. Compare me to these MMA analysts, okay? I'm spitting fire. Everybody knows it. Anybody who watches it is like, oh shit, this guy actually knows what he's talking about. And he actually has a unique viewpoint that no one else is really talking through that's generally correct. I'm going to share this guy's shit because I love it. So if you guys are willing to do that, I will love you forever. And I will remember all of you guys because you're the early adopters. Early adopters program. Okay, so first I want to compliment you guys as we go into the Jon Jones thing because Jon Jones said that his career is about to blow up. It's about to blow up, okay? He was saying that in reference to that he has fights with Jan Blachowicz, Dominic Reyes, and Francis Ngannou, some stuff at heavyweight. My career's about to blow up. And I'm like, huh. I mean, you've been the champion your entire, I mean, well, not your entire career, but I mean, like, everyone's basically considered you the lightweight champion for, I don't know, what, like, 8-10 years or something like that. Like your career's blown up, okay? You're not gonna blow up more by beating Jan Blachowicz or Dominic Reyes unless you starch them, right? Everyone expects you to win. But and actually let me rewind real quick. Thiago Santos win, zippity doodah. You want a split decision over Thiago Santos, who's awesome, but it's a split decision. You're not going to get a bunch of like career clout. If you want us to be like clamoring to watch your next pay-per-view, you got to start starching guys. And I'm not saying that's easy. These guys are beasts now at 205. But just the idea, oh, my career's about to blow up based on these guys that you have lined up at 205, that's just inaccurate unless you start starching guys. But if you move to heavyweight, that is a different ballgame entirely. And you would be entirely correct, assuming that you can go up to heavyweight and get a win. Because here's the thing. This is where I'm going to bring you guys into it. If you are wired like I am, or wired like these fighters are, which I assume that you are, because if you're watching my channel, I mean, listen, only somebody who is wired for combat would like watching me talk, right? Like, I mean, I have the majority of my family members, mom, dad, brother, etc., who are like, why don't you fucking take it down a notch, guy? When I'm just talking about regular shit, much less the thing I'm most passionate about on earth, okay? This level of intensity turns people off. They don't like it, right? Even though I am clever and fucking hilarious, it's just a little too intense. But you guys like it, which means you guys are intense fighter, combat-driven guys. Like if we were all, you know, in a fucking tribe of Indians or Native Americans or fucking in the Roman army or Romans, we would be soldiers. We would be combatants, okay? There were lots of combatants, lots of them that didn't even like doing it, okay? Then there were the people who liked doing it, special forces, people who were wired like us, okay? If you love mixed martial arts, you're probably wired for combat. Just plain and simple. Otherwise, you wouldn't like the sport, right? Now, if you're wired for combat, think through what is like the absolute best scenario you could possibly imagine for your life, right? Like what would be the bigger just ball dropper than being the heavyweight champion of the world in mixed martial arts? I mean, maybe you could say the heavyweight champion in boxing, but not if you actually know anything about both sports, right? So if you're like a dominant UFC heavyweight champion, that is the pinnacle of human aspirations for someone who is wired for combat. Period. Right? So think about that and think about Jon Jones. And if he can get to where he gets into the heavyweight spot and can start driving towards that absolute top spot, then he might have a shot at his career blowing up, because it's something different. He's stepping up to the big leagues. He's going for the big top pinnacle throne, right? And let me actually, you know what? The reason I just slowed down there, and if you guys were watching that was my brain short-circuiting, because that actually made me think of something else, okay? So think about the evolution of mixed martial arts, right? Like, just think about overall the evolution of the sport and why mixed martial artists have gotten so much better over this kind of, period of time that it's existed, right? So when it starts, you've got, I'm a wrestler. And it's like, I'm a karate guy. And it's like, let's get in a cage and see which martial art is better. And then they fight each other. By the way, those voices, whoever those hypothetical people were, they would probably beat the fuck out of me. So I'm just saying, like, I'm just comparing their readiness for the cage compared to someone in the current modern age, right? So at the time, first it was like, jiu-jitsu beats everything. So, okay, I put rock, you put scissors, I do jiu-jitsu, jiu-jitsu fucking beats everything, right? Then wrestlers figured out if they could learn some pretty basic jiu-jitsu escapes, they could just smash their faces in, right? Like, so, you want to get on the ground, you want to be on your back? Okay, well, as long as I know how to defend against a triangle and, I know what you're doing when you're trying to sweep and move into one of these, I can just avoid those things, and you're not used to having someone who knows how to move on the ground dropping elbows into your face. Like, that's new for you. Okay, so if I have basic jiu-jitsu defense, I can ground and pound you and I will win, right? So it was the jiu-jitsu era, then it was the wrestling era, then came, what's up? Well, wrestlers are pretty weak on their feet, so if I can learn to sprawl and how to sweep and how to escape out of these things and I could stay on my feet, I'll just knock these wrestlers the fuck out. Chuck Liddell. So then you had the era of the Anderson Silvas, the Chuck Liddells, the guys who were impossible to take down and would just knock everyone out, right? Then after that, you got into the modern era. The earliest stage of the modern era is the era right after that, which is, now you have to be good at everything, right? So that's the evolution of the sport. Now you have to be good at everything. On top of which, okay, now someone is born, right? Someone's born, and I promise you, I'm going to bring this back to Jon Jones, because Jon Jones said he wants Francis Ngannou, okay? That's what he said. And this is all going towards why he does not want Francis Ngannou. Francis Ngannou is the first, or the best athlete to ever be a professional mixed martial arts fighter, period, okay? And the reason for that is because he was a homeless guy in Cameroon who had no, it's like you, I don't even know who to even compare it to. It's like Jimmy Graham was born and then just dropped in the middle of the desert in Cameroon. You know what I mean? Like, a guy with that gift of athleticism was born with no parents in Cameroon. Now, I don't know about his parents, but I just do know that he was, homeless. Then he moved to Western civilization and was homeless. And then was like, oh, sure, I guess I'll try this boxing thing. And they were like, oh my God, you're the best fighter ever. Okay? But my point is, let me go back to my point. So you have two reasons for the evolution of the sport. One is the sport has just evolved. The other is that what gifted athlete, like a freak athlete in the United States, would be born and then be growing up and realize, wow, I'm a way better athlete. And they're like, you know what I want to do? I want to go be a cage fighter. None of them. They're all like, I want to go be a professional basketball player, football player, etc. Right? So what I want you to understand is, so you've got the technique side of it, which is the martial arts. Then you've got the, I've got a decision to make. I'm a freak athlete. What sport do I want to dedicate my life to? And now you're going to start seeing a lot of guys dedicated to fighting. Okay. Now, not quite as much in the heavyweights as kind of in that 205, 185 Goldilocks zone, but nonetheless, the level of athlete is going to continue to improve. And Francis Ngannou just happens by happenstance to be is there any question in your mind that if Francis Ngannou would have been born in Oakland, California, that he would be like, making $20 million a year in the NFL right now? I mean, that's what he is. I mean, he's an NFL tight end, like a top 5 in the league NFL tight end. That's what he is. He just, by happenstance, is in the UFC. And if he punches you in the face, your head explodes. And Jon Jones has 2 people in his family that are, well, his one brother is like one of the best defensive linemen in the league. He makes $17 million a year. That's a lot of dough for the NFL. And Jon Jones is just kind of like the slacker that was like, I'll go to junior college and wrestle. He's like, oh, geez, turns out I'm the best fighter ever, right? But Francis is the one guy at heavyweight. It's like, why on earth would you start with him? Right? Like Jon Jones, you want your career to blow up? When you go to heavyweight, you need to win, okay? So your first fight should not be the absolute toughest fight in the entire division, except for maybe Stipe, right? Like, you'd be better off taking on DC. Like, I mean, I don't know if DC would take the fight, but DC, at least you can beat him at light heavyweight. Might be a different story at heavyweight, but like, those are the top 3 guys. And I mean, which of them is most likely to like decapitate you with one punch? I mean, there's no question on that one. And you think that you're going to be able to wrestle him? I mean, maybe you will, but the only time I've seen you have, serious, like, intentional success wrestling against an opponent was at 205. Gustafsson, who's not really built very well for, like, I mean, he's like a tall, lanky striker. I don't know. I mean, you took DC down once or twice, but, like, again, not Francis Ngannou. If Francis Ngannou has even developed moderate wrestling takedown defense. You know what? I can't believe I just said that. DC is for sure harder to take down than Francis Ngannou. But DC is not throwing instant death at you every time that his hands leave this position. So, point of all of this roundabout, absolute, incoherent nonsense, let me just acknowledge that was one of the least well-structured string of thoughts that I've ever put together on video. And yet, somehow, I think it came to a good place, because we got Jon Jones says he wants his career to blow up, or that he thinks it's about to. I say it's not going to unless he goes to heavyweight. I explained the evolution of the sport, why Francis Ngannou is like an example, just by happenstance, of what the future of the sport is, and then tied that back to why Jon Jones should not want to fight him in his first fight. So even though it sounded totally incoherent in my mind, when I play it back, it's actually pretty smart, because I'm Jesse on fire, and all I do is spit fucking fire all day long, son. Jesus, it's impressive. Anyway, so Jon Jones should go to heavyweight and fight not Francis Ngannou, would be my suggestion. Maybe Alistair Overeem would be a better start. Matter of fact, that sounds like a perfect start to me. Alistair Overeem's coming off a couple wins, just knocked out Walt Harris, pretty impressive. I think I like Jon Jones in that matchup. I like him in that matchup a lot. And as an example, Rosenstreich went 5 rounds and then ended up knocking out Alistair Overeem. Right? Rosenstreich, 5 rounds, knocks out Overeem with like 10 seconds left. Rosenstreich fights Ngannou and is unconscious before, anyone has even sat down. They're still standing up before the fight. It's like, okay, let's get going. All right, guess we should sit down. Oh, it's over. Oh, Ngannou, he's unconscious. Hey, someone get a respirator. Get the smelling salts. He might be dead. So, yeah, not Ngannou. Don't take that fight. Don't take that fight. I love the idea of Jon Jones at heavyweight. Don't fight Ngannou. Let's just not do that. So, next, I wanted to talk about boxing versus MMA in general, because this is a conversation that I got into with a couple other people, and I had some interesting thoughts, because this all started because good Lord, I made that reference and I said, if Conor McGregor did a few of these next to impossible things, if he pulls those off, he could be considered our modern day Muhammad Ali. And so we should be rooting for him to do those things, because then we will have lived through a legendary period of the fight game. Whoa, how could you say such a thing? You use a hypothetical of something that could happen and then made a conclusion based on something that hadn't even happened? What? But that inevitably brought into the conversation boxing versus MMA, blah, 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 blah. Okay, bottom line is this. I am going to stand by this, that UFC is already a bigger sport than boxing. Just go by the numbers that it generates. Okay? Now, if Mayweather wants to come back and fight blah, 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 someone meaningful in a boxing match, yeah, his pay-per-view will probably do as well as Khabib versus Conor. right? Khabib versus Conor, I think, did 2.4 million pay-per-views. And I think Mayweather versus Pacquiao did like 4.2. That's a decisive gap. But that was the most built-up fight like ever. That's one guy. There's no one besides Mayweather that could do numbers like that. Wilder versus Fury, guess what that thing did. Everybody watched that, right? Like, that felt like, if you're sitting here watching this, you're a fight fan. So that felt like, oh, everybody's watching Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury, right? What do you think that one did? How about 800,000? How about 1.1 million between both fights combined? 300,000 on the first one, or 360 or something like that, and then 800,000 on the second one. Okay? So, boxing, bigger sport? No. And the UFC, so here's exactly what I did. When I started talking to people about this, I was like, let me just make sure that I'm saying correct information. So I did research. I know this is really hard for people. Like actually looking up like data and facts before you go and vomit information into the comments without having even looked up what the fuck you're talking about. I know that's hard, but I like to practice what I preach. So I went and looked the stats up, and all I had to do is 2 searches, or looked at the results, 2 separate results, right? So boxing, I looked at the top 15 boxing pay-per-views since Mayweather and Pacquiao, so since 2015. And then I looked at every UFC event, okay? Because there's a huge list of all the number of pay-per-view buys on all the UFC events. Here's what I'll tell you. When you get down to the 15th biggest pay-per-view in boxing, since 2015, okay, think of how many UFC events there have been since then. You're in the range of around 300,000 pay-per-view buys for the 15th biggest boxing match in the last 6 years. Okay, so that's what, 2.5 a year. So basically one of the top 2 boxing events in a year is around 300,000. Okay, you go through the UFC, like we're talking like an average UFC event is doing more than that, right? Like there are a handful of UFC events that really bombed that did like 100,000 buys, but for the most part, and just an absolutely average run of the mill UFC is doing 350,000. The bigger ones are doing way more than that. So there's just no comparison. The numbers are in, okay? Like if boxing could produce enough fights that people were interested in to where they could be doing 350,000 buys every month like UFC does, except UFC does plenty that are way more than that, then they would. Okay? So there's just, people have a misconception because they're comparing UFC as if like UFC is like, I don't know, they look at it differently because they're like, oh, there's UFC, but boxing is this big, large thing. And it's like UFC is an organization. Boxing is this big thing. No. UFC is an organization that facilitates mixed martial arts fights. Okay? Boxing is the same thing that just has no organization. You got, Arum and you got a few promoters, but all of them have their heads up their ass. And also, if there were enough fighters that they could build up to where they could support the kind of numbers UFC is doing, they would do it. UFC is what, like an $8 billion company now? You think they don't want that money? You think that if they had enough fighters people were interested in, they wouldn't do it? They don't. The sport's not as big. UFC is a way bigger sport. There's no question about that. And the fact that you can go, oh, well, if Canelo fought Triple G, that'll do 2.5 million buys. Cool, that's 2 guys. And how many buys is Triple G going to do by himself? You got 1 guy who's a star. Cool. You want to see how many Conor McGregor will do if he fights someone meaningful? Same as Canelo. Okay, so there you go. Star for star. Now what? Right? Tyson Fury. Okay, cool. How many people are going to buy the next Tyson Fury fight if he's not fighting Deontay Wilder? And same thing with Deontay Wilder. Okay? Here's the thing. Mike Tyson could fight a fucking tomato can, and his pay-per-view will do more than any active heavyweight boxer right now if they fought anyone other than Deontay Wilder fighting Tyson Fury. I will fucking guarantee you that. Mike Tyson makes a video on Instagram hitting pads, and then if it was like Mike Tyson is fighting some guy you've never heard of, I guarantee you that pay-per-view would do more buys than Tyson Fury versus except for maybe Anthony Joshua. Maybe Anthony Joshua. If Anthony Joshua fights one of those 2 guys, then that would do a lot of buys. I forgot about him. So remove him from the equation. Okay? Maybe Ruiz. Okay, I would actually want to watch Ruiz fight Wilder. I would, like, Fury would have... yeah, Ruiz would have no chance against Fury. But I would watch him fight Wilder for sure. But yeah, so bottom line is you got a handful of guys, you know, a little round robin there, but that's it. That's all you got. You have that many stars at each weight class in the UFC. At least. There's no comparison, dude. And then also, like I was saying, I'm an athlete. I want to go be a fighter. Which sport are they going into now? They're going into mixed martial arts, right? Now in the inner cities, in a lot of areas, there's still the remnants of what sports were forever. Time immemorial, we train boxers out of here. Hey, you want to go learn to fight? Go learn to box, right? But like, monetary incentives are what creates society, right? If you're going to make more money and it's more stable in the UFC than it is in boxing, that's what people are going to start doing, right? And these boxing gyms are going to close down and they're going to be reopened as mixed martial arts gyms with the boxing guy who was running the boxing side of the mixed martial arts, you know, gym, right? I mean, that's what's going to happen. And, you know, boxing's not going to die, but my point about the Conor McGregor, Muhammad Ali thing is that I'm talking about legacy. And so, you know, the bigger sport at the time in 40 years is going to dictate who is important when they look backwards, right? So like if UFC is way bigger than boxing then who was big in UFC now is what people are going to look back on as like, you know, who are the legends of the time. And, you know, like, again, I'm not going to dive down this rabbit hole again, but the bottom line is this, like, with the Ali comparison, all I want everyone to, like, I'm not saying Conor McGregor is Muhammad Ali. I was pissed yesterday, okay? If anybody couldn't tell, I was pissed doing that podcast. Like, you ever want to see me look, like, really annoyed? I was really annoyed. I listened to a lot of super, super ignorant comments, and then I just went on camera. I was like, but this is the thing, dude. Fact. Muhammad Ali, incredibly controversial during his career. And people, it's all revisionist history because people are so predictable. Everyone likes to glorify the old days. Like that is just what happens. Like it's just the way it is. Like it's like we're a romantic species. We romanticize things. Okay, the reality is go watch a documentary so you could see footage of what that was actually like. Like Muhammad Ali, go watch an interview for why Muhammad Ali said he didn't want to go to Vietnam. Okay? Like, you know, everybody's like, no, he stood for peace. He stood for do. If you actually go watch it, you'll go, oh. And what you're going to take away from it is, wow, it was a really different time back then. Because what he said is, I'm not going to go die killing some Asians for the white man. I'm a Negro. We're talking verbatim quote. Like, I'm a Negro. I'm not going to go die killing Asian men. I'm not killing Asians that didn't do anything to me for the white man. And I agree with him. Like, I totally agree with him. There's no reason that he should go, especially the heavyweight champion. There's no reason. And they drafted him because he was a influential black leader, you know, and you had absolutely stone corrupt white guys in the government back then. Like all this shit now, all these SJW shit now, and I'm not going to do politics on this channel ever, but all this SJW shit about how institutional racism and keep people down. Okay, that is not true anymore, but it absolutely was true back then. I mean, 100%. There's no question that Muhammad Ali was drafted because he was a threat. Like the Black Panthers were a threat. Like this is a huge threat to the institutions that, you know, these old white guys were kind of holding together. It's just a fact. That is a fact of history. Okay. But the way that Muhammad Ali talked about it, like, and the only reason I bring it up is because people act like Muhammad Ali was just like universally loved through his career. And that's not true. Right? Like you had the media that was painting him as some like militant, you know, some militant black guy who's like against America, which is not true, but that's how he was being painted in the media, right? Like what the media says to people is, I mean, they always paint people with a brush that's not reality, right? But at the same time, what the media says dictates what people's opinions are. And so the opinions back then were not like this idea that it was like, Muhammad Ali at the time is not real. It's not real. He was one of the most divisive figures there is. It's just that as our culture has evolved and we've looked back on that time and then reevaluated, we're like, geez, who were the villains back then? Sure as fuck wasn't Muhammad Ali. You know what I mean? Who were the villains? Probably the shithead white guys that were trying to send him to go die in the Vietnam jungle. Those are the villains. So now Muhammad Ali stands for something great when back then to half the country he stood for being anti-American because that's how the media painted him, even though he was actually standing on his principles. But, you know, if he, I mean, like, anyway, it's just revisionist history. I am on Muhammad Ali's side 100% on that, for the record. But I'm just saying that the idea that because Conor is, you know, I don't know. You know, I mean, obviously we're talking about different things, but you know, dude, Conor's out there. He's pushing the Irish government to do the shutdown because he's scared for his people and, you know, the coronavirus thing. It's not like the guy only exists to do coke and punch people in the head. There's a lot to that guy. That's why I was saying yesterday that I relate to this guy. Like, I understand. Like, I'm telling you, I am a good person. I have the best intentions from the people around me. Family is very important. I knew Conor was going to tweet that thing to Khabib when Khabib's dad was in a coma. Because, like, yeah, he's in a beef with Khabib. It's the fight business. But family matters way more than any of that. I knew there was no way Conor would say... I knew he was going to actually come out and not only just not say... Not, like, you know, he could have just not said anything about it. I knew he wasn't going to say anything negative. But I knew he was going to come out and he was going to say something positive to Khabib and his father. I knew it. Because, like I said, I relate to this guy. And he's very self-destructive. So as he holds it together and his best qualities come out, people are going to start to see that he's a lot more like Muhammad Ali than you realize. And Muhammad Ali had like 1,000 kids out of wedlock, okay? It's not like this guy was, you know, floating on a cloud of moral rectitude either. Like, if you're a professional fighter, okay, there aren't a lot of... Like, that's what I'm saying. That's what's so impressive about Khabib. Do you know how rare that is? Like, a guy who has dedicated his life to smashing people's heads in, who also lives by such strict discipline and doesn't have vices, is just a good guy. Like a genuinely good person where whether what he's feeling inside might be wrong, but he never acts on it. I mean, you gotta have so much respect for that. It's not something I can do. I have terrible impulse control. Terrible impulse control. But yeah, so does Conor. But he's a ball of passion. I mean, like, the guys that I connect with are these guys that are this just like bound up ball of passion. Darren Till. Darren Till is a guy where if he had just, his life had gone just a little bit different, he could have easily been like a British gang enforcer that was like slowly taking a knife and like digging it into a guy's arm because he didn't, you know, pay his debt on time. And he was just cold-blooded, like. But then at the same time, there's like, he is such a I love how honest he is, man. I love how honest he is. Like, he came out and directly said that he was terrified before the Gastelum fight. Like, utterly terrified that he didn't want to fight. He got knocked out. Well, he didn't get knocked out by Woodley, technically, I don't think. He got clipped hard, and then I think he got submitted. I can't remember. Either way. But then he got knocked out by Masvidal, and he was scared. He went up, like, so, and his response to that is, I'm going to go up a weight class and then fight one of the most vicious gorilla knockout artists at 185. Dude. Just balls of steel. I thought it was idiotic. I thought it was very similar to Jon Jones wanting to go up and fight Francis. I love being proven wrong. But he just said after, he's so honest. He's like, I was terrified. I didn't even want to go in there. But he conquered it, and he beat it, and he won. You know? But Darren Till at the same time, like, he's a guy where, like I said, you know, he could be slow stabbing somebody, and simultaneously, you could tell he's like 2 sentences from crying because the passion inside him erupts. You know, and that's how I am too. Like, not crying like I'm sad. It's like, it's that, like, that thing, that fucking thing that in modern society you don't get out. Like, and so sometimes if it really builds in you, like, you don't have an outlet for it. If you're like wired like me, you don't have an outlet for it. Like, you can't fucking get it out. You start talking about something that inspires you and you just break down. Straight up. I mean, that's how it is. I honestly, I think it's like a warrior trapped in 2020 thing, you know, because that's the kind of thing where, you know, if you're like combat, it's the kind of thing where it's the night before and you get blindly focused and you guys are gonna go fight, you know, like, and the implications are as big as they can be, right? Like, as big as they can possibly be. And you focus and then you go out and you do your job, you fight, and you either come out the other side or you don't. And human history, we've always had that as a part of the experience, and not everybody is wired like that at all. Like, I would say a very rare portion of people are. But if you're really wired like that, like I am, for sure, and you have no outlet for it whatsoever, it's like chokes you sometimes. And that's how Darren Till is. But Darren Till's a professional fighter, so he's got an outlet for it. Unlike me. I just get to talk shit into a fucking camera. Tell you about how I'm gonna make bone necklaces out of all the other MMA analysts' teeth, which I will. I'm gonna get a lot of satisfaction out of that, man. I'm gonna get a lot of satisfaction out of being the biggest MMA analyst. I'm gonna tell you that right now. That is the mountain I'm climbing right now. You hear me talking about mountains to climb? That's my fucking mountain. So you wanna help me climb that mountain? Go start recommending me on Reddit and these other, you know, whatever, forums. Because I'm not on them. I should probably get on that. I'm good at this. This is the only thing I'm good at. Talking shit into the camera, and then that's it. The rest of it, matter of fact, if you think that you could contribute to my career in a way like some, business management, etc. Now, I've built businesses, but in terms of like the getting myself out there faster, holler at your boy, because marketing I've always hired out for. But what else do I want to talk about? Oh, so Henry Cejudo, his manager just came out and said that he didn't think that his retirement was going to last very long. Shocker. I mean, dude, everybody knows that in between fights, you're going to have multiple months off, right? Like, everybody knows that. So why not say you're retired? I mean, if you got double belts, like, you got 2 belts, hey, I'm retired. I'm retired, Dana. Why not? You know what I mean? Like, what's the difference? How does he know whether you're training or not? You know what I mean? You could be doing whatever. You just say you're retired. It's a good bargaining position. Simple as that. I said from the beginning, I'm like, there's absolutely no way he's retired. He's got the UFC by the balls. So, bottom line is, I mean, I don't even need to talk about that. That's just, he is definitely not retired. Oh, I did have another thing I wanted to talk about. This I actually do want to make another video out of, though. I'm going to talk about, you know what? I am going to make another video about that. But this is probably long enough for this one. I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you for listening. Go ahead and like, subscribe, ring the bell, comment, share onto forums, please. Love you guys. Early adopter program. I'll never forget.